Okay, so here is the second part of our movie digest for default, which is about the 1997 financial crisis as experienced in South Korea. Okay, so in this part, we're going to discuss the IMF conditions that they imposed during the negotiation before they granted the bailout for South Korea. And then the latter part of the video would be the conclusions, okay, what we've learned from the movie. Okay, so we have 4 IMF conditions that we're going to discuss. First is the declaration of the top 11 merchants as bankrupt, easing foreign investment or allowing hostile takeovers. And then we have easing the labor market, easier dismissal of employees, and then interest rates are increased. Okay. So the first one, declaring the top 11 merchant banks as bankrupt. Was it necessary? What's the reason? For what purpose was it done? So the nation itself is already bankrupt. So they no longer have any reserves to back up their currency. Inflation is unrestrainable. Their prices of the commodities goes up and up. At that time, the banks were unregulated and have done things that shouldn't be done. They lent more than what they have. Their clients are businesses that are also struggling. So declaring the nation to be bankrupt, the people would want their money in their hands, okay? So any deposit they have in the bank, they would likely withdraw. So in that case, the banks would be crippled in their operations all the same. Declaring them bankrupt would allow them to immediately halt operations. Whatever money or fund that remains in their vaults, it remains with them. So on one hand, it's highly unfair to the people who have deposits. On the other, it allowed the banks to dispense their own obligations with what little money remains with them. Okay. On one hand, again, it's beneficial to people who loaned from those banks. They would not need to immediately pay them, and even if they remain with a financial crisis, most of the borrowers couldn't pay on time. On the other, the banks would have to focus on liquidating their business and not much on the collection of those outstanding loans. So they also knew that it's highly unlikely that the borrowers could pay at that time. Okay, so what they're after is a reset. Let's start over, end the current operations and start a new one, freshly. Okay. With the given situation, selfishness did ensue. Workers won't feel any security, so they doubt the company would be able to continue. Their work quality would be affected. There's not much sense in continuing. Okay, continuing poses a lot of complications as well, a lot of problems that would need resolution, and they aren't easy problems to solve. Okay, so the easiest approach for them would be to start over, so plus impose regulations. The nation already collapsed, so the rest must follow before starting over. Also, should those banks remain, they would be questioned. Okay, so how come you are still operating? How did you survive? It would make the government look very incompetent as well. So when the government collapses and the people no longer trust the government, that's chaotic to a level comparable to the apocalypse. Okay, the truth is we do need a government. No matter how frustrating and incompetent some or most of the leaders are, the departments are still functioning and providing the services the people need. Okay, bare minimum, but we'll take it. Okay, without a government who would impose and implement the law. The government is composed of, 3 bodies. You have the legislative body, makers of the law. You have the judiciary, they uphold the law. And then you have the executive body, they implement the law. Okay. Second condition, easing foreign investment, even allowing hostile takeovers, whatever for. So the nation cannot rely on itself anymore, because it's already bankrupt. It is in that predicament because of their own decisions and actions, right? And so they need someone else to help them out. If you want an analogy, it's a person who got stuck in a quicksand, nothing to hold on to pull oneself out. So someone else should help to get the person out. That was the SK situation, okay? Its citizens have lost their money, their jobs, their savings, their investments were losses. They were scrambling to get money by selling what little properties they have. So those who knew what's going on, they knew better than to invest in SK. The whole nation is in turmoil. If you offer investors, domestic and foreigners alike, the same conditions as pre-crisis, they would not accept that, okay? So to entice investors and to stimulate economic activities in the country, they recommended increasing foreign investment, okay, and allowing hostile takeovers. So if you're a foreigner and you're thinking of investing in SK during the time, what are your considerations? So hostile takeover, allowing the other party to have control of running the business. Given how the South Koreans performed, majority were unable to prepare for the impending crisis, then, how could investors trust them with their money? The investors would want to ensure that their money is relatively safe, okay? Risk would always be there, but there's always a certain level of risk that would be considered acceptable, right? Ikaw, kung alam mong hindi marunong mag-manage ng fund, yung isang tao or business, ibibigay mo ba sa kanila yung pera mo? Tapos ipapaubaya mo ba sa kanila yung management? Okay, hindi naman, di ba? In that situation, you won't trust them to manage your money well. So you have to do it yourself. Or at least appoint someone you know to do the job for you. Since the investor is a foreigner, then most likely that his staff or a trusted team is also composed of foreign individuals, okay? So I believe it's for this reason that they included that condition, okay? So it's not entirely unreasonable, okay? To the citizens of a country who has a history of being colonized, the Philippines as well, we would feel that such actions would be invasive and a little similar to colonialism. So as much as possible, countries really do have rules and limits on how much ownership foreigners can have in their companies in their country, okay? There are also rules on, which companies or industries should be wholly owned by the citizens, which industries can only be wholly owned by foreigners. Also, ownership of real estate, especially land. Normally, foreigners are not allowed to own those, okay? So the idea is that we must protect our country from pervasive invasion of any form, okay? Each nation is proud of its own and on its own. We do not want to give foreigners any opportunity to capitalize or benefit from something that is supposed to be ours, right? Our land, our country. The opportunities here should be given to Filipinos. The profits should be enjoyed by Pinoys. The goods and services should be given to the citizens. Our needs must be met first before any excess is given to others, okay? So it's pretty much the same mindset or ideology, whatever country it is, okay? The country's people and its government have that understanding. Our citizens first before others, right? So, but since the situation in SK was dire back then, they can only give in and allow foreign investors to take over, all right? Next, easing the labor market or easier dismissal of employees. So, just why? Well, foreign investors. In the US, wage rate is over 10 USD per hour. So if you convert that to the currencies of the countries here in Asia and compare that with our wage rates, you would know that in terms of USD value, our labor cost is very cheap, okay? In developed countries, the norm is contractual work. Permanent jobs are not common. Part-time jobs are the usual. So employers do not want to deal with employee termination and lawsuits. When you think about it, employers should have the discretion on who to hire and who to fire, okay, for whatever reason they see fit. Yes, sometimes the reason is as simple as, I don't like you, I can't work with you, okay? But in countries like ours, the Philippines, our laws want it to be fair. As long as you're qualified, as long as you're doing your work properly, you cannot be terminated from your job, okay? Our labor code calls for fairness, equal opportunities in employment. But think about it. If you're the one paying for someone else to work for you, would you keep paying them if you don't like them? For whatever reason. In a way, it's your money, right? Sometimes the concept of job security poses a risk to companies, employers. Let's say you and your employee differ in social values. During a conversation, it became an argument. Hey, you're the boss. Do you want someone to undermine you, to continue working for you? So it's not about right or wrong. It's about respecting authority. And it could be a sad case, I know, but the point I'm making here is this. Your money, you should have a say on how you're going to spend it. Okay, of course there are laws on minimum wage that should be complied with, but other factors that take into account human behavior or will involve human behavior and human interactions, we all have differences in opinion, so we tend to choose who to be friends with, right? We usually avoid those that have different views from ours. So in the workplace, it can't be helped that some employers, some investors would want to have a group of like-minded individuals. So there's that case. The employees were unjustly terminated and they sued the company. They won and the company would have to pay them for what they should have earned from the time they were dismissed until the verdict was issued. Okay. Also, they were allowed to return to work because they were unjustly terminated, right? But here, if it were you, would you let them to continue working for your company? Okay, there's that division already. There's that resentment towards each other already. So how can they continue working together harmoniously? Okay, so if you were the employees, would you want to continue working for that company? Okay, so easing the labor market would free the investors from those risks which they deem unnecessary. It could be a catch-22, but that's for another time. So the law is there because of possible abuse, but the law is not needed when there is no abuse. Okay, something like that. Okay, lastly, we have increasing interest rates. Okay, why so high? Inflation. What happens during an inflation? So prices go up, right? Since prices are high, spending is low. People is not keen on spending money, buying goods or services because the prices are high. So without spending, the country's GDP would be low. Gross domestic product is a country's measure of economic growth. So sa dami ng naproproduce na goods and services na available sa market, na binibili ng tao. So when GDP is low, the perception is that the economy is not good. So there's not much activity, trading of goods and services. Since there's not much activity, investors do not find it attractive. Okay, why put your money in an economy like that? Okay, how would you profit if there's not much economic activity? So normally, to encourage spending, interest rates would be lowered. When do you want to borrow money? When interest rates are high or when they are low? Low, right? You would pay less interest. So with low interest rates, people would be encouraged to borrow money. At least that's the point of that. With the borrowed money, they are expected to spend them on goods and services. And so the economy would grow. But during a financial crisis, the opposite is done. Okay? Why? Okay, even if you, even if you lower the interest rates, because the people have already lost their jobs, they are aware that they cannot most likely pay back the loan. So they would not borrow money, okay, even with low interest rates, okay? But then again, this is a financial crisis, okay? That's why the opposite is done. Instead of lowering interest rates, they are increased. Too high, right? As seen in the movie. So why? One of the causes of the financial crisis is overspending. That was actually true. Of all the reasons, this one was what the media highlighted. Mr. Yun predicted that this is what they would say. In a way, it is true, okay? Overspending. The people already spent a lot of money and drove inflation doing that. What's needed to curb the effects of inflation is to discourage spending, right? The thing is, this wasn't affected by regulatory authorities. This happened naturally, or not exactly. The regulating agency did a bad job in regulating the monetary system. But again, this was in 1997. Technology isn't that advanced yet. There might be a shortage on staff or personnel as well. So monitoring or regulation is admittedly difficult to execute back then, okay? 2014, 2015, when I was working at LBP, from what I gleaned, the financial reports are electronically transferred to BSP on a daily basis. So there are monthly, quarterly, semi-annual, and annual reports as well. So not sure if this is imposed on all banks. Most probably to the top tier ones, universal and commercial banks, right? Anyway, going back to high interest rates, they were also trying to attract investors. So the higher the possible return, the more they are enticed to invest. Okay, given the situation, it's really risky to invest during that time. So they needed more incentive or reason to put their money in a bankrupt nation, to put up businesses to keep the economy moving in that nation or country, right? So there's a lot more to speculate, but we'll stop here. Okay, for now, we can always go back in later discussions. Okay. So other question that I have is this: where do you think is the president of the country? Okay, so this is a reality even in the case of private companies or organizations. They do have a certain level of understanding economics and finance, but they are not exactly expert level, okay? So what normally happens is they rely on the so-called experts. Whatever recommendations they make, as long as they're reasonable and they make sense, they would be accepted by the head, and that would be the basis of the decision. So it's important that the experts are knowledgeable in many aspects of an organization, especially when the decisions to be made would affect the overall organization. So it's also important that they're ethical and they're supportive of the long-term goals and objectives of the organization, not selfish bastards, right? So that's one reality, okay? Now we go to the last part, conclusion. So what have we learned? So first off, there is nothing wrong with taking advantage of what you know in this case, or else, in the case of Mr. Yoon, his situation would be like all the others, okay? Still, we shouldn't be celebrating while the others are suffering. Knowledge, education, these are important. You need to have knowledge to understand something. In a recession or depression, the poor find themselves drowning in debt, unable to provide for their needs, trying very hard to get a job, accepting one at low rates even without any employment security, whereas the wealthy people are in a position to acquire the properties which the values of are declining, real estate, company stocks, company acquisition, takeovers. So search for the truth. Watch out for the truth. Don't rely on anything that you hear other people are saying. Get the bottom of it. Go straight to the source. With the truth in hand, be supportive when it's needed and be critical when it's crucial. So remember how the South Koreans supported their currency when it's, by donating the gold that they have. So that's some patriotism right there. They're very supportive. It wasn't about the corrupt people in the government. It's about pulling the country out of its dire situation. Okay? Also, be like Miss Han. Do not give up. Keep on trying to help out the people. And then be like Mr. Yoon. Be knowledgeable. Be aware of what's going on. Be prepared for whatever may come. And then be like Gapsu, responsible and kind. Though at the ending of the movie we see him yelling at an employee, certain circumstances could change a man, and that's what happened to him. He was too kind before, he'd been taken advantage of, and he suffered because of it. He suffered a lot, okay? And so decades later we see him being unkind. He probably doesn't want people to think that he's easy to deal with or that he would be easily scammed or something like that. He learned his lesson, though it changed him in a way that's not completely unreasonable. It's understandable given what he went through, but even so, let's try to always be kind while also protecting ourselves from selfish bastards, okay? And then lastly, I'm not going to include the technical ones provided in the discussion, so that will be for you to slowly digest and understand on your own terms, okay? So good luck. I'll be leaving links to good reviews in the video description as well as the transcript of the video discussion. Alright, so that's it for this one. Thanks and bye.